I had Mideast sources telling me they were heading your direction, looking at venues, ready to set up this signing ceremony. Now we're hearing it could possibly be a digital ceremony. Do we think this is something that will be happening in person, or do we think this is something that is going to happen before the president gets on the plane and shows up at the G7?
I mean, it seems like anything in person is off the table, and you can hear maybe from the echo in my voice, I'm the only person here. Like, there's nothing happening in Geneva right now. So there's not, but even the virtual signing, there are questions about that today, with Tehran pushing back, according to a state media report, about whether that will happen. We should know today is the president's birthday.
Yes.
So he wanted this deal for his 80th, and it doesn't look like that will necessarily materialize, although we have radio silence right now from the Americans, including on what would be in this MOU. To Feiner's points, let me just respond to a couple of them. It's absolutely true, at least from the press perspective, that we have not seen point form at all in writing, either on background or something published on a government website or something, what is on the table or what isn't. The Americans have been downplaying stuff that is coming out of the region, particularly from the Americans, saying don't believe everything you read, but they aren't offering their own position yet, and that is absolutely true. I think one thing that we have heard from a senior administration official on Friday in a briefing when it comes to that diluting of the uranium is that the American position is that it will be diluted on site and then removed. Again, Iran has not backed that up, but they're sort of trying to do both, as opposed to either removing it immediately or diluting it in place and leaving it with the Iranians. So a lot of questions swirling here. Of course, it's going to be on the agenda. The president arriving for the summit in Evian, France. This is just up the lake from here in Geneva. Geneva is already cracking down, so protesters will be face quite the gauntlet run, I think, to gather in this city, should they decide to do that. But we're going to see where it goes. But right now, it just seems so fluid right now, whether they're going to get anything on this. And one final point on the cash. Mr. Feiner and many others are right to point out that there's virtually no one expects a deal to come here without at least some release of something. The U.S. official on Friday saying the U.S. is open to both lifting sanctions and unfreezing assets. Trump is drawing a line in the sand on sending direct cash from the Americans. We don't know yet whether the cash will come from other sort of allied countries, or if it's just simply unfreezing of assets that's on the table.
Also, that seems to be a very specific parsing of words. Like, it's not cash. You're not getting pallets of cash. But you can send money other ways, including unlocking some of these funds in Oman and UAE. Yeah.
Still musing on what a digital signing might look like as well, Josh. I mean, I assume at least I hope there's two-factor authentication.
DocuSign haunts us all, David, and I think it haunts this administration as well, and we're just going to see one step at a time where it goes. I think that this is just very fluid, and we just don't know where it's going to land. The president, of course, is facing political pressure. I think we sometimes have slept on the fact, particularly audiences abroad, his poll numbers, including on handling the economy, are at or near all-time lows. Handling the economy was his silver bullet, right? That used to be the one thing that he could sort of dine out on, and even in the aftermath of some of his lowest moments, that held firm. So he's under a lot of political pressure here, and perhaps it's that could be why the Iranians seem to be ragging the puck, to use a Canadian term this morning.
Wow.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, you're in hockey. Ice sports are big there in Switzerland. Yeah, you're going to be in good hands.
Yeah, Josh, as we draw from what John Feiner had to say, there was a moment where Christina brought up kind of this comparison to what we saw in the JCPOA, and it is clear that this is a comparison that is rankling President Trump. I wonder if you could talk a bit about that. So we've touched on frozen assets, the prospect for getting some money, cash, otherwise restored as a result of this deal. But the JCPOA is something the president has talked about and not trumpeted, but quite the opposite for most of his political career here. He tore it apart the minute that he got into office. Why does it rankle him so much? And indeed, how close is it, as you see, and other observers, as we kind of piece together what this memo of understanding might look like?
One through line of all his commentary in the last several weeks has been an apparent nervousness that whatever he signed is compared to the JCPOA, because of course, if it looks a lot like the JCPOA, or if it walks like the JCPOA and quacks like the JCPOA, then what was the point of all this will be the question that a lot of people are asking, right? Not only withdrawing from that deal in the first place, but last year's bombing campaign and this year's more fuller-fledged mission. So I think that's why you're seeing him dig in on the pallets of cash. And to the point of inspections that John Feiner raised, that did come up with that senior U.S. official on Friday, who said that there would be some sort of international verification and supervision of this. That raised my eyebrows and a lot of others, because the U.S. had not talked about that so far. The Iranians certainly haven't talked about that. So if that's true, that will sort of lend credence to whatever nuclear pledges are in any MOU that may or may not be published by one or both parties. But if that's not true, then it casts doubt on it. And if it is true, then another thing, of course, is that it will continue to invite those comparisons to the original deal.
That was, you stole my next question, because that was what I was going to ask you. I mean, you know, Vienna's not that far from where you are. I wonder if any IAEA folks are expected to show up at the G7. And is that something that all these leaders who have been reticent to get involved in this conflict, much to President Trump's annoyance, might try to gently suggest while they're all in the room with him that maybe this would be a way to facilitate this, and, you know, Iran might be amenable to restarting some of those inspections by IAEA folks who, look, the criticism that Iran was cheating is valid and something that people can get into. But what we've heard from these inspectors is even when they know they're kind of trying to pull the wool over their eyes, there are things they can see and notice, or the absence of which they notice by being on the ground. They tell me it's always valuable to have some sort of a presence of these inspectors. Yeah.
It's a great point. And I think we're just simply not in a position to know what, or, you know, whether they're near agreement on this or what the U.S. is seeking. They simply, you know, haven't said. I think, you know, in the next few days, G7s have always been a bit bumpy for President Trump. Not only last year when he bailed on my home nation of Canada early, and that he did not like the Pomeroy sweets, you know, in the foothills of Alberta, my home province. But you know,
so much unexpected Canadianness in this segment. All right, continue.
I just tuck it in, little Easter eggs for you all. But going back to the first term, of course, you remember that like iconic photo of Merkel, you know, lecturing him over a table while he sat arms crossed, cranky. So we don't know what this is going to look like, and it's unclear how amenable he's going to be to suggestions in this. But one thing that our colleagues have reported is that the Europeans are coming with a proposal on helping clear the strait. Seems like Trump thinks that that would be unnecessary, or at least too little, too late. But the Europeans are trying to at least bring some sort of olive branch that they want to get involved if and when there's a deal to help, for instance, clear mines and other things to ensure that the strait is open. Of course, that has been one of the things that Trump has really teased as an immediate effect of what looks like it would take shape as sort of a multi-stage deal. Step one does seem to be the, you know, quote unquote, reopening of the strait and whether we see traffic resume. Remember, the Americans in the last week or so have started saying, hey, surprise, secretly overnight, we've been helping ships get through the strait safely. You know, it remains a bit fluid on how much of that has been verified.
Josh, we've got a minute left here. We've talked about President Zelensky being present for the G7. There's going to be this kind of working group. What is your sense from your reporting of what the White House hopes to get out of that meeting? Again, not a one-on-one, but a group meeting with the Ukrainian president.
I think the hopes are on the other side. President seems to have washed its hands a little bit of the conflict. He wants an end to it generally, but doesn't seem like he wants to put much capital into it. The Europeans are hoping that they, as always, can remind him of the Ukrainian perspective on it and hope that he just doesn't walk away and give either implicit or even more so explicit blessing to the continuation of that conflict. We just don't know. But Trump has been pretty disinterested in it for months now and just doesn't really talk about it. So I think even the G6, if you will, are going into that Zelensky situation with modest expectations at best.
All right, Josh Wingrove, our in-house Canadian. We had high expectations
for that interview with you, Josh, and you've exceeded.
You've met all of them, buddy.
Well, good, because there's no one else here for you to do it with.
I was going to say,
this is it.
I hope you find some friends in your very lonely conference room.
That may or may not have materialized. Sorry, Mrs. Wingrove, for coming to Geneva early.
Listen, I Googled it. It is a 1-hour, very scenic drive along Lac Le Mans to get to Evian from where you are. So
that's true. It's not a hardship. That's
Josh
true.
Wingrove, thank you very much.